Wednesday morning, 6:07 a.m., Ethan Rowe woke up to the sound of footsteps, but they weren't for him. A jogger zipped past the park bench without even a glance. A dog pulled its owner toward an overflowing trash bin, sniffing eagerly. A cyclist cut across the path, their tires hissing on the damp pavement. The city had started its day. Ethan had not been invited. He sat up slowly, his back screaming in protest from the hard bench. His throat was parched, and his stomach clenched with a hollow, patient hunger. At least those things still worked. His body still believed he belonged somewhere, even if the world disagreed. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were undeniably real. They were his. They carried the same faint scars from childhood accidents, the same dry skin at the knuckles from the biting winter air. Nothing about him had changed. Only the things that confirmed his existence. At 6:19 a.m., Ethan walked to the nearest public restroom, a cold metal door, a coin slot, a small black sensor above the handle. He pushed. The door didn't budge. A man walked up behind him, waved his phone near the sensor, and the door clicked open instantly. Ethan stepped back, letting the man pass. The door swung shut. Ethan waved his own hand where the man had waved his phone. Nothing happened. No denial. No error message. Just nothing. A complete absence of response. At 6:46 a.m., Ethan tried again, this time at a cafe. The warm light and smell of coffee were a stark contrast to the cold outside. People ordered without thinking, their names called out and printed on cups. Names entered into registers, accepted as proof of being. When it was his turn, he spoke softly. "One coffee." The barista smiled, still half asleep. "What name?" she asked. "Ethan," she typed. Her smile faded into a small frown. "It's not." "Taking it," she said, tapping the screen again with her finger. "I can't open a ticket without a customer profile." Ethan just stood there, waiting, hoping the system would at least reject him, give him an error, anything, but it didn't. The register simply reset itself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dropping, as if her apology could somehow fix a missing person. "I can't process this." Ethan stepped back outside. He watched as someone else tapped a card and received a coffee in seconds. He watched another person scan a phone and unlock a scooter. Every single action fed a system. Every system fed a record. Every record fed a future. Ethan had no future in their databases. He had become a gap, a crack in the pavement that the city didn't even notice, let alone trip over. At 7:32 a.m., Ethan stopped trying to prove who he was. Not because he had given up, because he finally understood the rules of what was happening to him. Systems don't forget by accident. Not this completely. Not this cleanly. Not across banks and employers, and identity scans, and email servers, all at the exact same time. This wasn't a glitch. This was an action. A deliberate move. Ethan started asking a different question. Who wanted him gone? He repeated the question in his head as he walked. Not like a desperate whisper, but like a key turning in a lock. Who wanted him gone? At 8:10 a.m., he reached the public library. Libraries, he hoped, still believed in old forms of access. Guest terminals, open Wi-Fi. No questions asked unless you made a scene. He sat down at a computer and stared at the blank search bar, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He didn't know what he was looking for yet. Then the memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, a subcontract, a routine data cleanup job. It came back to him in fragmented pieces. A short email offering contract work. A temporary badge that felt flimsy in his hand. A login credential that expired after just 72 hours. The job itself had been simple, almost mindless. Delete outdated archives. Remove duplicate entries. Clean up the digital clutter that nobody had the budget to deal with. It was silent, anonymous work. Ethan had liked it for that very reason. No meetings, no office politics. Just a list of tasks to complete. He remembered the building, It wasn't his usual workplace. A different office, a different lobby, a different security desk, where the guards smiled just a little too much. He remembered signing in as a contractor, thinking, just for a moment, that he was invisible, that nobody would ever notice him there. And he remembered the folder. It was mislabeled, nested so deeply within the server architecture, it was almost impossible to find by accident. It had a name that didn't match its contents at all. At first he thought it was a simple mistake, a misfile, a lazy admin. He clicked it open. Inside, there was one single file that refused to delete. He tried once, then again, a small prompt appeared and vanished too quickly for him to read. But the file remained. Ethan remembered the feeling more than the details. That sharp, sudden moment when a routine task turns into something else entirely, when your body knows something is wrong, long before your mind can put a name to it. He opened the file. It wasn't dramatic. There were no smoking guns, no obvious evidence of a crime, just numbers, names, transfers, small, almost insignificant financial movements over long periods of time. It was invisible theft, invisible power. Ethan hadn't understood all of it, not at first, but he understood enough. Enough to recognize a pattern that had no business being in a folder marked for routine cleanup. Enough to realize the file wasn't misplaced, it was hidden. And at the very bottom of the document, there was a note. Just one line. Simple, cold. If accessed, initiate contingency. Ethan stared at that line for a long time. Not because it was threatening, but because it was so specific. It wasn't a warning. It was a procedure, a trigger. He hadn't reported it. He hadn't copied it. He'd simply closed the file and gone home, thinking that was the end of it. He thought that if he walked away, he would be safe. He was wrong. At 9:24 a.m., Ethan leaned back from the library terminal, the weight of the memory settling in his chest. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was a motive. He looked around the library, people, reading books, printing documents, verifying their entire lives. With little plastic cards, nobody looked at him. Not because he was invisible, but because he was unrecorded. And then Ethan understood something else. The erasure wasn't meant to punish him. It was meant to protect someone else. At 10:02 a.m., Ethan stood up. He didn't have a plan, but he had direction. If the contingency was triggered from that file, then the file was still somewhere out there. And if it was still somewhere, then someone still cared very much about keeping it buried. And Ethan was going to be the one to dig it up. Thanks for watching. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.